What's up everybody, I'm Derek, this is Rocking eForge, and today I'm going to show you how to make a cold cut chisel for chiseling into things like sheet metal without heating it up. So let's get into it. I'm going to use this piece of old leaf spring that I got from a Chevy pickup at a junkyard here a while back, which should be 5160, a pretty decent carbon steel, great for impact resistance if heat treated properly. And I'm going to start by forging down on the edges to try to make this thing as square as possible. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and take this from flat to as close to square as I can. This is a higher carbon steel, so I got to make sure I'm not forging it too cold because it has a higher propensity to crack at lower temperatures. And you'll see me turning it on the flat side and pounding down near the edges, and you'll probably think, but Derek, isn't that counterproductive to forging this down into a square? And the answer to that question is no, because as you forge on the edge of a piece of steel, the blow itself is more heavily concentrated on the edge that you're forging, and the rebound off the anvil is more heavily concentrated on the opposite edge, which means you're going to get more steel moving in the first few layers of atoms of the steel than you do in the middle. And because of that, you see a lot of spreading of the steel near the point of the blow, and not so much in the center. So you end up with kind of mushrooming out of the steel over the center, and if you forge that down to where the two mushroomed edges meet, you'll develop a cold shut and a big crack that runs right down the center of your piece. So I've managed to get this from about 1/4 inch thick to almost 3/8 inch thick, and I've gotten some pretty decent extra length out of it too. Alright, I've switched to the struck end. For indexing purposes, I'm going to keep it a little skinnier this way than it is wide. Flip it back over to the business end and forge in the actual tip. Now my goal is to get this down to about 3/16 inch round as kind of a preform before forging the actual tip. Just inside 1/4 inch. I'm going to knock these corners down. And then next heat, I'm going to bring this in and round up the first about inch. And that should get us to about 3/16 inch round. Alright, well that's spot on 1/4 inch round, so I didn't get nearly as much skinnying up of the round taper as I thought. So I'm going to have to take another heat to get this thing a little skinnier. I'm going to take this back to a square taper, because it's going to be easier to work that down to the dimension I want if it's square. Alright, so that's about 3/16. It's now time to forge that round section flat. Now I'm sure you're thinking, why bother forging it round if you're just going to flatten it again? And the answer to that question is, it gives it a nice preform so that when you flatten this taper, it still tapers on the edges and it has a bit of a nice rounded edge to it. Alright, so now that we've got the tip roughed in, I'm just going to knock off these corners. Alright, so that's going to do it for the forging process, and we're just going to touch mark this and get into an annealing cycle. So I'm going to do a critical annealing cycle, so I'm going to put it in the fire, heat it up to about a dull orange, and then bury it in some vermiculite in order to relax the stresses that the steel has seen due to the forging process. Then we'll do some initial grinding and heat treat, and then finish this thing up. Alright, so that annealing cycle is done. It is the next day. I left it in the vermiculite overnight, honestly because I was doing other projects. So now it's time to go to the grinder and rough in the tip and the hammer end. 60 is an oil hardening steel. So I've got a big ammo can full of oil. I'm gonna run this in and out of the fire to slowly bring it up to a dull orange heat. I'm gonna try to get the whole body that kind of dull orange and then quench just the tip in the oil itself. I'm gonna scrape it to watch the tempering colors run, and then I'm gonna let the heat in the main body of the punch bleed forward to temper the tip. Too much. Now I'm looking for a dull yellow color, a dull straw color. That's going to indicate about 400 to 450 degrees. And then I quench it again to keep it from heating up further. And I'm going to do that as many times as I can until it stops changing colors. I managed to trap a lot of heat in that punch. I'm getting more tempering cycles out of this than I do my normal punches. I've never done this type of quench and temper with any oil hardening steel, so I'm just kind of winging it and hoping it works out. I think that might be it. Well, I've still got heat in this thing. Rub it down with some beeswax. First I gotta get that oil off though. I like putting a layer of wax on my punches and chisels because one, it prevents rust, and two, it gives it a nice kind of tacky layer on it that you can kind of keep better hold of. We'll grind in the edge and do a little polishing and call it good. Now that's going to do it for today's project. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, drop a comment, hit subscribe, ring that notification bell. If you want to support me and the channel further, please consider becoming an honorary striker on my Patreon. Link is in the description below the video, and keep on rocking.